Please note that today's episode contains mentions of death, including suicide, as well as adult topics that might be inappropriate for younger audience members.
Escape Pod, Episode 797. Flashback-Flash from the Vault Special.
Hello, and welcome to Escape Pod, your weekly science fiction podcast. I'm Divya, co-editor of the pod, and one of your 4 hosts for this episode. A quick note up front for any authors who might be listening. Escape Pod general submissions will be reopening in September, and this time we're going with a theme: joy. For complete details, please see the announcement on our website, escapepod.org. This week, we bring you a special flash-length flashback edition with 4 very short stories selected by myself, Lafferty, Benjamin Kinney, and Alasdair Stuart. First up is my selection, Wetting the Bed, by Heather Shaw, narrated by Anna Eley. The story was first published in Escape Pod's inaugural year, back in October 2005. Heather Shaw is a writer, editor, gardener, and aikidoka living in Berkeley, California, with her husband and son. She's had her work appear in Strange Horizons, Polyphony, The Year's Best Fantasy, Escape Pod, and other nice places. Anna Eley was the wife of Escape Pod founder Serah Eley and a popular recurring narrator. Now, get ready to float like you mean it, because it's story time.
Wetting the Bed by Heather Shaw. When the floods came, all of us kids climbed into bed and pulled the covers up over our heads, while our parents rushed about trying to do something to stop it. As the water level rose, we could feel the beds lift off the floor, floating through our houses, bumping down our hallways and out our front doors. We sat up in bed and waved to one another as our beds merged into the canal that now flowed between our houses. We shrieked and giggled as our beds spun and bumped along with the swirling water. Waves lapped at our box springs, but our covers were still warm and dry. It was the way our beds bumped together down the streets that gave us the idea to tie them together. Kaylee Kramer had a great big canopy that served as the center of the first cluster. We used Joey Johnson's pocket knife to start tears in one of the bigger sheets and played tug-of-war to rip strips to tie with. By the time the waters were high enough that only the tops of the tallest buildings stuck up above the surface, we had 6 separate clusters of beds, each one with a great queen or king bed at its center. In those early days, we had pillow fights all the time, glorious mini-wars of cotton and feathers that no one won or lost. The girls curtained off one of the 4 poster beds for privacy to swap nightgowns, and the boys sent spies to yank at the sheets and make the girls squeal. It wasn't all fun, though. While there were still buildings above the surface, we learned the hard way to steer clear of them. Joey's cluster came too close once, and some adults jumped onto one of the twin beds at the end of one arm and started climbing over headboards towards the center. Every bed the grown-ups touched began to sink, and the cluster lost 3 beds before Joey thought to cut the arm free with his pocket knife. The adults threatened and pleaded with us as they sank, but what could we do? After that, Joey's cluster was called the Crippled Octopus, even after they rearranged the beds to cover the exposed side of their main bed. It was around this time that we began to notice that Brett Barnum, one of the bossiest, oldest kids that none of us liked too much anyway, was starting to get hair on his chest. His voice was cracking too. One morning as the sun came up, his bed began to sink. Joey had been sleeping near him to keep him from picking on the little kids, and when he saw what was happening, he cut Brent loose quickly. We watched in silence as Brent's bed spun away from us and down, Brent snoring away heavily, like he always did, until with a watery gurgle we heard no more. By the time the waters were high enough that no buildings poked through the surface, we had other worries. The rains came, gently at first, then more and more, harder and heavier. Kaylee's canopy worked successfully as a tent until one of the big kids sheltering under it touched it and it sprung a leak. Suddenly, all the kids with rubber sheets became very popular as we pulled their sheets off and stretched them over the bedpost, keeping the bedding underneath dry and cozy. We've been relying on one of the oldest kids, Toby Tarlington, to dive down to town and bring back cans of food. On the 10th day of the rains, he came back empty-handed. Some of us have been worried about this. Each time it was a deeper and deeper dive, and we didn't want our sole source of food, Toby, to drown. But Toby told us that we weren't even over the town anymore. We'd been drifting, and now we're over a real lake, or possibly even the ocean. We tied together all the clusters and held a meeting, kids leaning over headboards to get a better view of the proceedings. Toby handed out supplies that he'd been gathering during each dive. Each cluster got 2 fishing poles in line, a camping stove, a cutting board, 3 knives, and a case of propane. Toby demonstrated how to use everything, but when he cleaned the first fish, a lot of the little kids started crying for their mommies for the first time since the flood came. Even the older kids looked a little green, and it was the girls who resolutely picked up the knives and followed Toby's example. Even though the heavy rain stopped, the mood on the beds is subdued. Pillow fights are infrequent and lack the vigor of the early days. The kids don't like the new chores, though most of us see the necessity. Even the kids who still have a bed to themselves come to the main beds to sleep at night, curled together like puppies. No one sleeps alone anymore.
And that's our story. I love stories about resilience in the face of adversity, and this one certainly checks that box, but it does so with a unique style. At first, the apocalyptic flood is almost like a slumber party. It's only near the end that the children discover that survival means more than cutting off the heavy adults. It means starting to act like them. It's rare that a situation so serious gets treated with such a light touch, but I'm always appreciative of that, especially when it comes to situations about children.
This is Lafferty, co-editor of Escape Pod, and today we're going back in time to relive the flash fiction Chump Change by Pete M. Butler. Pete Butler is a writer from Pittsburgh. He penned the popular Squonk stories that began on Escape Pod and found their way to Podcastle. Our narrator is Jake Squid.
Chump Change by Pete Butler. It's going to be the 3 of clubs. I know this as certainly as I know my own name. I'm less sure about some things than my fans would think, but sometimes the swirling laws governing what may happen coalesce into what will happen with astonishing clarity. The sun will rise tomorrow, the Pirates will beat the Mets tonight, and as soon as I announce my guess, the 3 of clubs will appear on the monitor in front of me. Jack of spades, I proclaim full of conviction. The monitor flickers and is suddenly filled by a pixelated version of the 3 of clubs. I feign a look of annoyance and frustration, and fidget in a very comfortable padded chair. I might not be able to see the studio audience, but they can damn well see me. My room still smells like ammonia and other cleaning supplies. Appropriate, since it's a janitor's closet and all. It was emptied this morning to accommodate me, my chair, and a TV set. Not to mention 2 cameras and a microphone included to record my reactions. And, as Dante no doubt hopes, catch me cheating. Outside the door are 2 of his confederates. both being kept very purposefully in the dark about what's going on. All they know is that I'm to be denied any form of contact with the outside world. The screen goes dark. Dante has drawn another card. It's time for me to guess what it is. Just on principle, I take a few moments to let the image of the impending reality take shape in my mind's eye. I miss this guess too. It goes this way through the entire deck. I call 5 of the cards correctly. It's a touch better than average if I'm keeping track of what's already been drawn, but really, just a statistical blip. It'll give me something to crow about. The producers are going to be pissed. A guy guessing 54 cards with perfect accuracy is kinda cool. A guy muffing all but 5 is boring. Guess which one I promised them? In fact, they probably cut me off for a commercial somewhere around the 0 for 25 mark. The screen goes dark for the last time. The door opens and a pimply stagehand leads me back into the studio. I make sure to put my best "that was so unfair" face on. I'm met with scattered applause. The host, a pleasant-looking wasp with good hair and a hollow smile, strides over to give me a firm yet clammy handshake. I can't for the life of me remember his name. "So, having an off day, Mr. James?" he asked through his perfect plastic grin. "It's the spirits," I grumble nice and surly. "There's a lot of negative energy here." "If you prefer," Charlie Dante says, "I can remove myself from the premises entirely." He's pushing 60, starting to turn slightly pudgy, with a full white beard and no hair to be seen on his head. I was expecting him to look smug, but the truth is he looks strangely sympathetic. It's a bit disconcerting. I'm only starting to appreciate how good he is at what he does. "Yes," I announce, "I would be glad to demonstrate the depth of my power if that man—" "Oh, that's all right," Captain Hairdo cuts in smoothly. "Perhaps another time, all right, Mr. James? It doesn't take a psychic to know there was no way in hell he was going to risk another 5 minutes of dead air." I grudgingly let him lead me to my seat. "Looks like your $1 million has survived yet another challenge, eh, Mr. Dante?" "In a manner of speaking," Dante agrees. "This was just a preliminary round. If Mr. James had performed as he said he would, we would have moved the experiment into a more controlled environment. But it appears that won't be necessary. Dante has another surprise in store for me. I can feel it, like the rumbling of a semi barreling down the highway. I move into the middle of the road to greet it properly. Ha, I scoff. That $1 million is mine for the taking whenever I want. "Oh, I'm not so sure about that," the blow-dryer king announces cheerfully. "Acting on Mr. Dante's advice, we shot some hidden camera footage while preparing this experiment and... well, let's just look at the tape, shall we?" I bury a smile beneath a look of indignant fury. "Ah, Dante, you're everything they said you were." The tape turns out to be a highlight reel of Sylvia, my favorite assistant. She's a college student with very flexible ethics. There she is, leaving a radio receiver the size of a hearing aid in the closet where I'll find it. There she is again, trying to put a tiny camera where it might see the cards after Dante's drawn them, and so on. Wow. She has all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. How has she not been caught before now? I get a nice frothing outrage going, denying that I have ever seen this woman before. Charlie Dante looks almost apologetic as he reveals that Sylvia's employer, from her most recent W-2, is a poorly veiled front for myself. Charlie, Charlie, Charlie. Why so magnanimous in victory? This is your shining moment. Another fraud debunked. Gloat. Revel. It's not as if they're ever going to like you anyway. You've devoted your life to telling them there's no Santa Claus. Or was some small, buried part of you secretly hoping you'd see the fat man sliding down that chimney? The audience is hooting and hollering at me. Even the ones I've seen at tapings of my own show. I shout insults back at them. I send a few Dante's way, but he's sitting placidly, watching as Mr. News Anchor wannabe tries to calm the situation. Actually, he's only pausing it for another lull in the storm. I know what's going to happen a few moments before it does, so I have to fight down a hearty laugh. Sylvia trots out, having seen the light and ready to dish the real dirt on her boss. Sylvia, you treacherous wench. Bless you. The ensuing screaming match isn't exactly dignified, but I'm sure it makes for some great television. As I tromp off the stage, I think I see them. The men who drove me to this act of self-immolation. They're 2 largish white guys, both of whom look very quietly menacing, neither of whom looks comfortable being in the middle of such an animated crowd. FBI? Secret Service? Other? I have no way of knowing. But as the palpable sense of dread that's been slowly suffocating me for the past 6 months slinks away, I'm confident I'll never need to find out. I was too sloppy, too egotistical. Somebody important, somebody powerful noticed me, and they were going to put me on a leash. Of course, the two agents he, she, them sent to check me out firsthand will return with tales of a very humiliating public meltdown. As I storm out of the studio, I take a second glance at one of them, the younger one, through my petulant scowl. He's going to be dead within the month. Shot, I think. Oh well. I've dealt my career a mortal blow. Just for appearances, I'll help it twitch pathetically for a while before letting it expire completely. My own show will be off the air in a matter of weeks. What the hell? This whole TV psychic gig was getting stale anyhow. I'm sure I'd miss it if I didn't have about $65 million or so squirreled away in Switzerland behind various identities. Gosh, it sure is lucky that I sold my high-tech stocks before the market crashed. I check my watch. Something has changed. I have no way of knowing precisely what. That has all but guaranteed the Dodgers a win over the Giants tonight. I need to get my bet in before the game starts.
I always enjoy finding a classic trope to be approached from a fresh point of view. Modern writers have to work hard to make a time travel story feel fresh, and it's the same with an omniscient, or rather clairvoyant, character. I love seeing someone take a superpower to the fullest extent. For example, if I could teleport, I'd never walk again. Why do we see teleporters walking, ever? That was a nice detail in the show The Good Place, when Janet was never seen walking until she was forced to, and she takes a few steps before she yells out, "Walking is dumb." To a teleporter, it is. We will often see clairvoyants, either making a lot of money in casinos and then getting kicked out, or warning people of a disaster, and we know how that worked out for Cassandra. Our protagonist enjoyed the fame that came with his psychic TV show, but he turned out to be using his power on some much more lucrative fortune-telling. Even Agnes Nutter from Good Omens told her descendants do not buy Betamax and to invest instead in Apple.
This is Benjamin C. Kinney, your pod's assistant editor, here with my Flash selection for this episode, Bona Fide by Ben Hallert, narrated by Trendane Sparks. This story originally appeared in Escape Pod episode 533, as one of the winners of our 2016 Flash Fiction Contest. Ben Hallert lives in Oregon with his wife, 2 children, a plane, and a reach that regularly exceeds his grasp. Originally born in Texas, Trent Sparks eventually escaped and wound his way through a mystical series of jobs in the San Francisco Bay Area, where he's worked as a software QA tester for both graphics drivers and video games, a freelance mascot performer, and several jobs on a PBS kids show. For most of his life, people have told him that his voice is a pleasure to listen to, but since being a werewolf phone sex operator can get boring, he decided to use his powers to entertain a broader audience. So turn on your noise-canceling headphones, because it's story time.
Bona Fide by Ben Hallert. The block's turning into a rough neighborhood, the kind of place murder victims go to hang out. It's nasty and dirty, but it's home. What's got me pissed isn't a little trash. It's these stupid glasses everyone's wearing. Government wastes money on them instead of doing their goddamn jobs. Drives me nuts. The worst part, that dumb smile. You know the one. A bunch of fakers walking around and smiling at all the filth like it's high art. Hey man, forget your specs? Crap. A corner boy snuck up on me because I wasn't paying attention. He holds out his set. Free pair. I pay my taxes, boy. It's not free. Bug off. I keep walking, and the pest follows. Okay, then you've already paid. He waves them again. I don't want them. My taxes should go to real cleanup and maintenance, not those. I stop, point. They're insulting. I'm not interested in fantasy. I walk again, faster. The boy keeps pace, switching to that infuriating, reasonable tone parents use when they're trying to con kids out of being monsters. I don't need to be handled. I just want him gone. Look, guy, if you don't take these, someone will try again later, then again after that. Might as well get it over with. He brightens. Hey, you can just turn off the overlay if you want, you know. I slow. I can turn them off, and you'll all leave me alone? Sure, you can turn off any enhancement. Just click your tongue to... Yeah, I'm not a caveman. I grab the set. Okay, you win. Go bug someone else. I scowl at the glasses as he leaves me to find his next mark, then put 'em on. Everything around me changes. I ignore the pretty lies and start configuring. I know if I don't, the slums will look like new construction, the garbage in the street will be gone, and everyone will have the bodies of freaking supermodels. After a minute, I've got honest, dingy reality back. I'll take true filth over fake clean any day. But everyone still has that dumb smile. I want to scream, "It's not real! It's a lie! They're faking you out and you're buying it!" I want to, but they say I sound like a crazy person when I drop hard truths, so sometimes I don't. They don't care. They get their shiny buildings and pretty people, and nobody has to do anything for it. Well, at least the corner boys will stop hassling me. I squint. It's bright out. I reopen the editor, make them sunglasses. Not bad. For funsies, I flip one of those idiot mouths upside down. Oh, this is rich. The simp looks so messed up. I flip a setting so everyone's like that. That's better. Now I don't have to look at the grins anymore. Fine, they can have their illusions. I'll stay in the real world. I know the score. I've got my integrity. I keep walking, the last honest man in a world of lies, and I smile.
Oh, I love this story. On the surface, it's a fun little tale about hypocrisy. But on a second look, it's a deep and revealing story about hypocrisy. When the narrator calls himself the last honest man in a world of lies, he's only wrong on half of it. All of us, every human being, everyone, gets by on lies. I mean, I wouldn't call them lies, but there's the rub, isn't it? Besides, it's not even self-deception. It's self-creation. We see what we expect to see. For those of you who don't know, in my day job, I'm a neuroscientist. One of the most fascinating things about the human brain is how little of the world it really perceives. You have a rich sensory experience of sight and sound and color, but only a tiny fraction of that is actually coming in through your eyes and ears. You pick up a few pinpricks and hints, and your brain fills in the rest based on what it knows and what it expects. This is true for everything from seeing a tree in the corner of your eye. You have very little color vision in your peripheral vision, but your brain knows leaves are green and knows you have a tree there. To a conversation, where two people might remember the same gist, but if you asked them to really script out a conversation, they would remember entirely different words. And this is the way that our personality shapes how we see the world. All those expectations depend, in part, on who we are. We've all got our glasses, turning filth into high art, or turning smiles upside down. I just wish we had easier access to the settings.
Flash fiction tends to get a little bit overlooked, and with this one in particular, I wanted to do something about that. Oasis by Greg Van Eekhout is the first Flash piece EP ever ran, and now we do rafts of them across all 4 shows. Oasis isn't quite where it began, but it's where it began to coalesce, and revisiting it in 2021 was a fascinating and disquieting experience, as you'll hear. Host, narrator, and audio producer are all Serah Eley on the original, and while Serah's fantastic narration remains, I, Alasdair Stuart, one of the co-owners of Escape Artists, am tagging in on host for this week, and Adam Pracht has the audio con. So, without further ado, it's story time.
Oasis by Greg Van Eekhout. Only 4 of us made it to the escape pod before the ship was lost in a silent, expanding ring of plasma and debris. As the pod thrusters engaged, sprinting us away from the blast front, I turned from the porthole and looked at my fellow survivors. That's what we were now. Not a crew, merely survivors. The panic didn't hit me until I realized that, as a 4th-class engineer, I was the most senior spacer on the pod. I was in charge. I was in charge of an assistant botanist, a cook, and a civilian girl, maybe 12 years old, some crewman's daughter, the daughter of somebody dead. "Stop looking at me," was my first order. I knew we were going to survive. The filler engines would keep us in oxygen, and the particle sniffers would steer us close enough to stars to recharge our batteries. The waste recyclers meant we'd have a constant supply of food and water, and there was even an exercise unit that folded down from the ceiling to keep our muscles spry and healthy. I might have mentioned some of this to the other three, but I thought it would be cruel. We would never be picked up. We would never be rescued. We were going to die on this pod, many, many years from now. If it gets too bad, we can always open the airlock, the botanist said. A reprimand almost came to my lips. Instead, I nodded. Good point. The second day out, I got around to ordering an inventory, even though I knew very well what escape pods were supplied with. Medical kit, fundamental maintenance tools, and orgasm stimulators, which, though kind of depressing, really made a lot of sense once you stop to think about it. I moved on to demand everybody empty their pockets. The botanist had a pack of gum. The cook had a lucky coin. The girl had a paperback book. I had pocket lint. I looked at the botanist accusingly. No marijuana? Don't you even think of holding back, mister. But no, just the gum. I started off every morning and ended every evening by staring at the airlock. Opening it required a 4-step process that, in total, would take 15 seconds. On our 60th day, I rationed out the gum, and the botanist and I entertained ourselves by chewing and blowing bubbles. The girl and the cook declined to participate, but I let their insubordination and lack of crew spirit slide. I was determined to be a kind tyrant. Instead, they read the girl's paperback. They took turns. She read a page, he read a page, like that. You turn a lever that pops open the cover of the control pad. There's a big red button labeled Open Airlock. You jab it. Then you jab the Confirm button. Then you push the handle thing, and it's all over. On the 107th day, I got up to do it. I didn't ask the others if they wanted me to. I was 4th-class engineer. I was in charge. And I was so bored. I turned the lever. The red button was a big fat one, impossible to miss. The cook and the girl didn't notice what I was doing. They were still into the book. The botanist looked up. Hey, it's about time, he said. The girl's voice came from the front of the pod. The island of Gaunt, a single mountain that lifts its peak a mile above the storm-racked northeast sea, is a land famous for wizards. I hit the open airlock button. The confirm button lit up. I stared at it. I'm not sure how long. For a while. Ged stayed in the great house, working with the masters and all the skills practiced by sorcerers, those who work magic but carry no staff. The cook had taken over the reading. Wind-bringing, weather-working, finding, and binding. I punched confirm, wrapped my fingers around the handle thing. I closed my eyes. The girl again. They tied up the boat Lookfar that had borne them to the coasts of Death's Kingdom and back, and went through the narrow streets to the wizard's house. I closed the control panel. You suck, said the botanist. No, I don't, I said back. At least not today. I laced my fingers behind my head and lay on the deck before the airlock, waiting for the cook to start the book again.
This story really does have a different resonance in 2021, which, by the way, is how you say it hits different if you're 44. The crushing tedium, the sense of constantly being underfoot, the constant aggregate terror that after a while just collapses into a flat, grey line of eternal angst. This isn't a story about lockdown, but it is absolutely a demonstration of how art is different every time we encounter it, because we bring something different to it every time. But it's also a demonstration of something else, something more fundamental and vital, and I'd argue necessary than anything else in this story. Perseverance, and the perseverance that comes through community. Let's be real, this is a story that places suicidal ideation front and centre and at no point looks away from that. But it also stares it down every single time. The fear never stops slathering, the terror never stops screeching. We just look at it until it loses its grip. It always loses its grip. Sometimes it takes 10 seconds, sometimes it takes 60 days, sometimes it takes 16 months, but we hang on and we pay the price we have to because we know what we're going through will end. Sound familiar? I'm going to the cinema for the first time in 16 months as you listen to this. My partner's getting a haircut. We're getting cleaners in next week. We're double vaccinated, effective from tomorrow. And we're still wearing masks everywhere we go because we aren't idiots. And we don't want to put other people at risk. Things are different. Things are mostly better. We persevere. We recognize those differences and victories, and on we go. Or to put it another way, the way Greg puts it, none of us suck. Not today, and not tomorrow either. What a story. What a way to start our relationship with Flash fiction. Thanks, Greg, and thanks, Serah.
Escape Pod is a production of Escape Artists Inc. and is brought to you with a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Don't change it, don't sell it, please do go forth and share it. If you'd like to support Escape Pod, rate or review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite app. We are 100% audience supported, so we count on your donations to keep the lights on and the servers humming. You can donate via patreon.com by searching for Escape Artists, or via PayPal through our website, escapepod.org. Patreon subscribers have access to exclusive merchandise and can be automatically added to our Discord, where you can chat with other fans as well as our staff members. Our opening and closing music is by Daikaiju at daikaiju.org. And our closing quotation this week is from Nelson Mandela, who said, "May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears." Thanks for joining us for this special flashback episode, and enjoy your adventures through time and space.